Well, hey there, folks. It's Dr. Franklin, and this is a mini lecture specifically dealing with online interviews. In this mini lecture, I'll be talking about the differences between online interviews and face-to-face interviews. From there, folks, I'll start talking about differences between text-based asynchronous interviews and text-based synchronous interviews. Finally, I'll wrap up this presentation going over 7 guidelines that you should consider if you are using text-based interviews for your research study. A qualitative interview is an interview that has a purpose of gathering descriptions of the life world of the interviewee with respect to interpretation of the meaning or described phenomenon. These types of interviews have historically been face-to-face and to a lesser extent over the phone. When done face-to-face, the voice, intonation, and body language of the respondent could assist the researcher in understanding thoughts, feelings, and experiences of the participant. Face-to-face interviews involve a degree of spontaneity, and it allows the researcher to develop rapport more easily and put the participant at ease. In face-to-face interviews, the researcher is able to close out the interview more easily and ensure that the participant is satisfied and has said everything that they may wish to say. In this presentation, we will discuss how online interviews can be conducted for online psychological research. Online interviews are viewed in divergent ways, folks. On one hand, some believe that online qualitative research is valuable in its own right, while others believe that synchronous interviews do not readily lend themselves to the exploration of meaning. There are a host of practical, ethical, and methodological issues. For example, cost, timing, location, accessing hard-to-reach populations, anonymity, digital record, and reduction in unequal power. There's a host of issues raised by online interviewing that should be considered by the researcher. There are 2 main types of online interviews: asynchronous and synchronous online interviews. Specifically, we're going to be talking about text-based interviews. Asynchronous text-based online interviews are the most popular medium through which to conduct this type of interview. I will start discussing asynchronous text-based online interviews now. Asynchronous online interviews are interviews using email, and answers offered by interviewees are not made available to other participants and are therefore not shared, viewed, or influenced by other research participants. Asynchronous online interviews are typically semi-structured in nature and consist of multiple email messages being sent between the researcher and participant over a period of time. In terms of efficiency, several interviews can be conducted at a time, and a transcript is automatically generated due to the email transmission. Now, the actual amount of time it requires to undertake a research study using email may vary based on questions asked, degree of motivation, and engagement by participants, among other factors. Though email-based online interviews are thought to rank last in terms of generating rich data, and if I were to give you the ranking, it would be 1, face-to-face, 2, telephone, and then 3, email, it's thought that the interviews may help individuals with disabilities or anything that may differentiate the researcher from the respondent and create a great deal of self-consciousness. It's thought that the email interview may be helpful in facilitating disclosure and encouraging participants to share personal experiences. And this is especially the case for individuals embarrassed, alienated, and stigmatized. One problem that researchers may encounter with online interviews, folks, is that participants may not be good at typing. Now, one of the important issues a researcher will have to work out is how many questions do they send in the email. There is no right or wrong approach to the number of questions that should be sent. Some researchers even send the questions with the email invitation to participate in order to foster a level of transparency and to promote trust. The researcher also must make a decision about embedding the questions in an email or attaching them to an email. The latter may be viewed as more suspicious. A huge benefit of the online interview in this capacity is that the participants are able to engage in the interview in a familiar and convenient environment. For example, home or work, or using their mobile phone or work computer. All questions should be expressed clearly to participants or the respondent may grow frustrated. Some researchers found that participants who were interviewed via email appeared to remain more focused on the interview questions and provided accounts that were richer in reflection in comparison with those who engaged in face-to-face interviews. Of course, this outcome is contingent on who is being interviewed, who is doing the interviewing, as well as how much expertise the researchers have with regards to online interviewing. Synchronous online interviews are usually conducted using an instant messaging platform involving a conversation window displayed on the screen for both the researcher and participant that keeps a running log of the evolving conversation. This type of interviewing allows for the process of writing and submitting messages, which aids in a more ordered and structured conversation where dialogue is composed of all of these textual changes. Now, most instant messaging services allows for a researcher and respondent to view online and offline status and an address book that allows researchers to verify demographic information provided by participants. Address books can also be used as a sampling frame. There is no real consensus for which instant messaging software is most appropriate. The important issue that should be considered is that data security. Some go with encrypted software because of this, and the risk of personal information being transmitted to a third party, and whether or not participants have the technological skills to download, install, and engage with the new software. Those are things that need to be thought about. There are numerous factors linked to individuals' engagement in instant messaging research, such as whether or not participants have their settings set to allow messages from people outside of their buddy list, the topic of study, individuals' curiosity, the timing of the request from the researcher, and their ability to receive more information. There are a number of guidelines that researchers should consider when doing effective online interviewing. I will end this mini lecture by considering 7 guidelines. Number 1, researchers should recruit potential participants individually if possible. Recruiting participants individually will make them feel important and valued. Using mailing lists and discussion forums are great approaches, but where possible, communicating on a personal basis is essential. Number 2, if a researcher elects to invite individuals to participate, clear and succinct information in the subject line may prevent the email from being deleted. Number 3, researchers should strive to put the nature and purpose of their studies in lay terms so that participants can make an informed decision about participating. Number 4, it is good practice to include details of the ethics committee responsible for approving the research study at hand, as well as include details on how participants can contact researchers before, during, and after a study should they have questions. Number 5, researchers need to carefully consider the questions they would ask, and researchers should explore with participants their needs with regards to processing questions and responding to them. Considering the sequence of questions, that is, it's better to go from specific to more abstract, and providing a short summary of responses periodically fed back to the participant is a good way to not only show researcher engagement and participation, but it also may be beneficial to check for accuracy, interpretation, and completeness. Number 6, participants should be made clear as to the deadlines for responding to questions, and these deadlines should be reasonable in the context of their everyday lives. Timelines may be negotiated at the outset of the interview, and researchers may need to consider actions that benefit the participant in the event of fatigue given varying times of interviews. Finally, number 7, great care should be given to engaging participants throughout the online interview in order to produce sufficient data of good quality. This is important because a motivated and engaged participant can yield considerable rich data for research purposes.